Hello, everyone. My name is Veronica Lurby. I'm the councilwoman for the Town of North Hempstead District 4. And I would like to welcome you all to Under Our Feet, the resiliency of our drinking water. This workshop will uncover the state of Long Island's underground aquifers that provide all of our drinking water, threats to these important resources, and actions the North Hempstead community can take to keep them resilient in the face of climate change. This program is part of North Hempstead's Climate Action Community Engagement Plan, which is facilitated by the town's Climate Smart Communities Task Force. The town's Go Green North Hempstead logo represents our mission to engage and inspire residents, businesses, and other municipalities throughout the town to participate in actions that will foster ecological balance, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and help North Hempstead adapt to a changing climate, ensuring a healthy, resilient community now and into the future. First off, some housekeeping. Everyone has been muted, but you are all free to ask any questions you have throughout the presentation by typing them in the chat box. They will be answered at the conclusion. This workshop is being recorded and will be posted on the town's Climate Action webpage for anyone who may have missed it or would like to watch it again. And now I am pleased to introduce tonight's panelists. Sam Adler is a North Hempstead Middle School student that understands the fragility of our drinking water and has dedicated himself to protecting it. Dr. Sarah Mayland is an associate professor of environmental technology and sustainability at NYIT and founder of Water for Long Island. She was appointed by the governor to the New York State Drinking Water Quality Council. Mindy Germain is the commissioner of the Port Washington Water District and lead organizer of the Western Nassau County Aquifer Committee. She also has her own consulting firm, EcoLeap, that is assisting the town with its climate action initiatives. Megan Fastuka is an environmental specialist for the Town of North Hempstead, focused on sustainability initiatives. She is also the town's Climate Smart Communities Task Force coordinator. We are so lucky to have such wonderful residents and employees focused on sustainability at the Town of North Hempstead. And I know I speak for the entire town board when I say thank you all for being here tonight. So first off, I want to say welcome to Sam. Sam, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you have learned about our drinking water?
Hi, I'm Sam Adler. I am in 7th grade. I love to play soccer and I go to Weber Middle School. I have learned that we get our drinking water from aquifers under the ground. These are layers of sand and gravel below our feet that hold fresh water. So anything that we do up here, such as using fertilizers on our lawns, trickles down into our drinking water. I also learned that because we are a coastal community surrounded by salt water, we must be careful not to overpump our drinking water. Overpumping would draw in salt water and make our drinking water undrinkable.
So you seem to know a lot about water. How did that happen? How did you get involved?
When I was in 4th grade, I helped create the Residents Forward Every Drop Counts exhibit at Baywalk Park in Port Washington. It is a series of signs that explains what an aquifer is and different steps we can take to recharge it with filtered fresh water. These include creating rain gardens and using permeable pavers. Then for my bar mitzvah project this year, I raised about $5,000 to help 120 people in Africa get clean water. In the fall of 2021, I hosted a walk for water at North Hempstead Beach Park to shine a light on the water crisis in Africa and to help generate respect and appreciation for water here in North Hempstead while we still have time.
Wow, that is really incredible. So you represent what is really the next generation, right? And I want to ask you, what message do you want to share with the North Hempstead community?
Each of our own actions influences our drinking water. Just using water, efficient sprinklers alone can save thousands of gallons each summer. I'm asking you to try to conserve water, not only for you, but for my generation and future generations as well.
That is so important. And I want to thank you, Sam, for sharing this impressive work and your very impressive perspective too. I think we can learn a lot from you. Now it is a great honor to introduce Dr. Sarah Mayland to explain some of the issues under our feet that Sam raised and how they connect to climate change.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for allowing me to take a little bit of your time to talk about groundwater. This is what I'm going to be talking about very shortly. It's what is an aquifer and how does it work? What's the difference between groundwater and drinking water? And then directly talk to how climate change can not only threaten our water supply, but how you can be part of the 15% solution that we are going to be talking about this evening. So first of all, what is an aquifer? This is the name that we give to geologic formations that can do three functions: store water, allow water to move through it or transmit it, and allow us to retrieve that water, what we call yielding the water back in usable quantities. So we have three aquifer formations that serve these three functions. Aquifers can be made of a lot of different types of material. As Sam correctly said, our aquifers are sand and gravel, but other aquifers can be made of sandstone, shale, limestone, other types of loose materials, and even fractured rock. So here in Nassau County, we pump about 73 billion gallons of water out of the aquifers every year. This is a diagram of what the aquifers look like. On the left, we have Long Island Sound. On the right, we have the Atlantic Ocean. We have three main aquifer formations or discrete aquifers. The one closest to the ground level is the upper glacial. It's a relatively young aquifer and it's only been around about 15,000 years or so. It sits directly on top of the main aquifer, the Magathy, which has the largest amount of water stored in it. And it's where most of Nassau County draws its water from. And then at the very bottom of the three formations is the Lloyd Aquifer. It sits on bedrock. And the Lloyd is a limited aquifer, and it can't be pumped in the way that we pump Magathy and glacial aquifers so freely. Next. So that's what an aquifer is. So what's the difference between groundwater and drinking water? Well, aquifers store water. And the water that we store in an aquifer is called groundwater. And mainly it's simply rainwater that's fallen on the ground, filtered down through the soils, and reached the aquifer to become part of that water that is stored in the aquifer. When we pull this groundwater back out, check it to see if the quality is okay, treat it if it needs to be treated, and then send that water out to the customers, that's when we call it drinking water. You'll see in this diagram, this picture right here, that this is what the inside of a pumping station looks like. This is the well pump that's actually pulling the water out of the aquifer so we can use it. And that's the turbine that's circled in the red. The well itself, the pipe that goes down into the ground, is directly beneath that pump, that turbine pump. And so you can see the pump station looks very, very clean. And the process is pretty simple. We just suck that water, pump it right back out of the aquifer, and then use it. This is showing where all of the drinking water supply wells are in Nassau County. So these green dots represent a location where either a magathy or a glacial well is located. And so you can see they're all over the landscape of the county. The blue squares are Lloyd wells, which are deeper wells. And the red squares are where we once had Lloyd wells, but those wells have been closed. There are about 400 public water supply wells around Nassau County. Next. So how does an aquifer actually work? And it's relatively straightforward and simple. Aquifers, like many things in nature, they seek a balance. And so we have two processes, one where the water is coming into the aquifer, usually through rainfall and things like that. We call that recharge. And then there are a number of ways that water is leaving the formations, whether it's flowing into streams or ponds or lakes, whether it's discharging into coastal waters, or it's actually discharging into the subsurface under the ocean and slowly migrating back into the ocean itself. So this water in versus water out is the relationship that needs to be in balance. And when the system is not in balance, when one side doesn't equal the other, then what you have is a very unhealthy aquifer system, and changes happen. And usually those changes are changes that we would not like to happen. They're undesirable things that happens with the aquifer as it tries to readjust back into being an imbalance situation. Next. So the issue is that if we overpump and remove too much water out of the aquifer systems, that leads to an imbalance, and then that can result in negative things like saltwater intrusion. Next. So what is saltwater intrusion? Well, this happens especially in situations like we have here on Long Island, where we are entirely surrounded by saltwater. And normally the flow dynamics of the aquifer would be enough to hold the ocean out so that it doesn't completely invade the aquifers and go from fresh to saltwater. But when you take too much water out of the aquifer system as a whole, you can start to create conditions where the ocean actually can start to invade the aquifers. And this happens first right along the coastline. But it isn't caused by pumping along the coastline per se. It's caused by the collective withdrawal of water all across the county. So in order to either prevent saltwater intrusion or to stabilize a situation where you have intrusion already, what you have to make sure is that you sustain enough water in the aquifer system as a whole so that it can push back against the ocean and prevent further saltwater intrusion. Next. So on the left, you see a picture of areas in Nassau County that are actively experiencing saltwater intrusion. So the Great Neck Peninsula, the Manhasset Neck Peninsula are both areas that are dealing with saltwater intrusion now. Down on the South Shore, the southwest corner of the county has a long history of saltwater intrusion issues. And more recently, we're concerned about saltwater intrusion that is probably going to affect greater areas of the North Shore, as well as areas all along the South Shore. And this is basically a consequence of taking too much groundwater out of the system so that it can't hold out the ocean. The diagram on the right kind of shows you what is happening. The freshwater is always moving to the coast, whether it's Long Island Sound on the North Shore or the Atlantic Ocean on the South Shore. That's the destination of the freshwater. As long as there's plenty of freshwater moving out to the coast, the ocean doesn't come in. When we upset that balance, then the ocean starts to invade. Next. So this is where we see already now saltwater intrusion in Great Neck, which is the diagram on the left. Those areas circled in orange are areas of active saltwater and historic saltwater intrusion. And the diagram on the right is the Manhasset Peninsula. So those two blue circles show saltwater intrusion in the Port Washington area, and then another area up in Sands Point that has saltwater intrusion problems that they are dealing with. Next. So overall, when we look at the groundwater situation here in Nassau County, we have issues with quality of the groundwater and quantity. And some of these issues are in fact related to climate change or will be in the future. So as Sam so eloquently already noted, we live above our groundwater. And so we live on the land that sits directly above our water supply. So what we do on the land surface then can affect the quality of the water beneath us. So a number of issues have contaminated our groundwater, including contamination at Superfund sites, industrial discharges, chemical spills, discharges from septic tanks, and applying chemicals on the ground like pesticides and fertilizers. We've already seen that when this contamination gets into drinking water supply wells, it requires the water to be treated, and that drives up the price of the water itself. And we're seeing this now with some of these new contaminants like 1,4-dioxane that is very, very expensive to treat and remove from our drinking water. The other thing from a quantity standpoint is that we use a massive amount of water in the summer for irrigation and other outdoor activities. And so the water use in the summer goes up 200 or 300% above how we use it in the winter. And this contributes to this problem of depletion and creates the quantity problems that I've talked about. Next. So specifically thinking about climate change, these are some of the things that we know will be related to climate change that will influence our groundwater supply. First of all, we know that the sea level itself is going to rise. In this area, it may rise as much as 2 to 3 feet by the end of this century. And this is going to make saltwater intrusion even more of a problem and could make some areas worse than it is already. The areas along the coastline will be the areas that will be influenced first. In addition to the intrusion, we know that we're going to see more extreme storms. Many of these storms bring big storm surges where the seawater floods the coastal areas, and this seawater can get into the shallow groundwater, although eventually it does leave that area of the groundwater supply, but it does still turn it salty for a while. Climate change also is going to bring hotter temperatures. And when the temperatures go up, that increases water demand. And again, this can lead to groundwater depletion. Next. And we can have droughts, just as we're seeing on the West Coast, where they're having a 1,000-year drought situation right now. When you have droughts, you have low rainfall that allows the water table to fall. All the streams and ponds are fed by groundwater, but if the water table falls too low, then groundwater cannot supplement stream flow and the streams start to dry up. And again, the drought is a low rainfall situation, so people think their lawns need help, so they start watering more and more and more. So droughts affect our ability to even replenish the aquifer because of the low rainfall situation. Next. So putting it all together, we know that climate change can lead to overpumping of the aquifers, and overpumping generates this list of problems. Saltwater intrusion, we talked about, streams dry up, contamination already in the aquifer spreads farther under stressed conditions. This moves plumes around and can lead to further contamination of water wells, lowers the water table, ponds and lakes also dry up. We get less discharge of fresh water into the coastal areas, which can impact the balance and health of the coastal areas and estuaries as well. Next. So why is it a problem with the water table drops? So let me just explain this slide very quickly. What you're looking at is a time frame from 1940 to the year 2000. And it's looking at the water table elevation as an average for the whole county year by year over this 60-year time spread. And before the 1960s, the water table elevation was close to 70 feet above sea level. And you always want your water table to be above sea level. Then we had the 100-year drought in around 1965. And that dramatically dropped the water table elevation because there was no precipitation. So there was very little recharge. And the impact was to drain a lot of water out of the aquifer, lowering the overall level of water in the aquifer. At the same time, the county started sewering, which was a good thing because it protected water quality. But then when the rains came back, the water elevation never fully recovered. So it only got about 65 feet above sea level, which meant that there was now less ability of the aquifers to hold out the ocean. And that's when we started to really see saltwater intrusion to become a serious problem in parts of Nassau County. Next. So this is a map of all the water suppliers in Nassau County. We have about 45 of them. And each water supplier is responsible for meeting the needs of their customers. In 2010, the collective pumping level from all these suppliers reached a level of 203 million gallons a day. The reason that I'm mentioning it is that it had already been determined that the maximum we should take out of the aquifer is about 180 million gallons a day. So by pumping up to 203, that represented 60% of all the water that left the aquifer. This degree of water loss is unsustainable. And again, it helps drive some of these undesirable consequences when we take too much water out of the aquifer system. Next. And this graph right here really tells a story about how we use water over the course of an entire year. So this is January to December. These are 3 different years and how our water use changed during the winter months, which are January, February, so on. And then at the end of the year, November, December, these are when we're using water indoors only. And you can see indoor water use is very stable. But come the summer months from May to September, depending on what's going on each given year, is it a rainy year, a hot year, a cool year, you can see that the water use spikes up to 400% from what it was during the winter. This kind of water demand is unsustainable, and it's going to only get worse with climate change because all of the things I just mentioned, heat, drought, and so forth, will make water demand even greater than it is today. Next. So the national average on water use per person is about 100 gallons per person per day when you look at all the ways that you use water. For Nassau County, it's about 140 gallons per person per day, which is way above what most other areas of the United States use on a daily basis. And Suffolk is not too far behind us. And this is looking at just water that's provided by water utilities. Doesn't include things like industrial water use, agriculture, and things like that. So we are extravagant in the way we use water here on Long Island. Next. Finally, this last slide is again looking at this disparity between how we use water in the winter, which are these blue lines here, versus how we use water in the summer, which are the red lines. And you'll see that there's a horizontal black line. That's that 180 million gallons a day limit on how much we should take out of the aquifer over the course of a year. So you can see that for the summer, we always exceed that 180. And in this diagram, which is looking at years 2013 to 2021, 5 out of the 9 years, we exceeded the maximum 180 limit that we should be keeping within. And so the reason this is important is that water suppliers across Long Island have been asked to bring water use down by 15%. And we're not doing so well so far. Next. So to summarize, these are the 4 things I want to ask you to consider. 1, reduce your outdoor water use. 2, practice water conservation and however that works for you. 3 is really, really important. I want you to read your water bill, not just to see how much you're paying, but to see how many gallons you are personally using or your household is using. And then try to set your own household goal to bring water use down as much as 15% if you can manage it. And then lastly, be an advocate and be like Sam. So next. Please treat your groundwater like it's the only water you have, because it is. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Malin, for that eye-opening, informative presentation. Now, to bring things a little closer to home, our next guest is a local water supplier who will share how the trends that Sam and Dr. Malin described are impacting local suppliers. Please welcome Commissioner Mindy Germain.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. As a local water commissioner in Port Washington, I collaborate with all of the water districts in the town and around the town, and those include Sands Point, Roslyn, Manhasset, Great Neck, Albertson, Carl Place, and Westbury. We share resources and strategies, and we also have interconnections, which means that we're able to share water in case of an emergency. For my particular district in Port Washington, we have interconnections with Roslyn, Sands Point, and Manhasset. Each district is run by 3 commissioners. Pictured here is my district leadership. We oversee a staff that consists of a superintendent, a business manager, and a team of field and plant operators. We also work with an engineering team. Next. So districts range in size. The Port Washington Water District services 9,500 accounts, which represent 30,000 residents, and we pump over 1 million gallons a year from 12 wells. Just as a sidebar, we have reorganized our well because of the issue of managing saltwater intrusion. Some of our water is actually pumped off peninsula and then wielded through a large main that runs down Port Washington Boulevard to the peninsula. We also maintain over 1,000 fire hydrants, and this is done with 16 employees. Next. As Dr. Malin shared, pumpage nearly triples in the summer. As a district, we are working to reduce this summer peak because the more we pump our wells, the closer we draw the saltwater freshwater interface into the peninsula. Our wells have not experienced significant saltwater intrusion because we have been proactive over the past decades with well rotation, reducing pumping of at-risk wells, and practicing conservation. However, we need to do more. Seeing the growing impacts of climate change and having to take certain wells offline, whether it's because of saltwater intrusion or because of building new treatment to address emerging contaminants, we have a reduced capacity. And we're doubling down our conservation efforts with the goal of achieving a 20% reduction over summer months. Next. To do this, the Port Washington Water District launched a Do It for Port water conservation program with 5 components I will share now. The overall message: if you love port, water less. Next. Strategy 1 is really easy. It's called smart sprinklers. They're a predictive system that Cornell University research determined can save up to 40% of water consumed by traditional automatic irrigation. Next. Standard automatic irrigation is on a timer that is set at the beginning of the season. It waters exactly to that schedule. Next. Many districts, including Port Washington, now require a rain sensor be added to the system. This means the system will water to the schedule you set, except it will stop upon rain. Next. The newest technology, smart irrigation controllers, goes a step further, connecting to local weather stations via internet and only watering the amount necessary based on real-time conditions. This system gives your lawn exactly what it needs, saving water and saving money. Next. Here you can see the interface on your smartphone to track your water use that comes with the smart sprinkler system. While we cannot recommend a particular brand of smart sprinklers, the town recommends selecting a system with the American Water Works Association WaterSense designation. Next. The Port Washington Water District requires both rain sensors and smart irrigation technology for all new systems and is giving residents with older systems until 2025 to update them with smart irrigation. Many districts have different policies, so I encourage you to check with your local district on their requirements. As I said before, in Port Washington, both the smart irrigation and the rain sensors are required for any new systems. And we're also asking people who have systems from the past to update by 2025. Next. Here's data from our first 4 customers that made the switch. You can see in blue their water use before, and in orange their water use after, a significant reduction. Next. And here you can see in numbers that savings range from 20,000 to almost 70,000 gallons per year. Next. Smart sprinkles require an initial investment that we see ranging from $150 to $250. While it pays for itself quickly, in Port Washington, we offer a $150 rebate to make the transition more affordable. Next. The next Do It for Port conservation tool is scheduling. Remember, Nassau County requires odd number homes can only water on odd numbered days of the calendar. Even number homes can only water on even number days, and there is no watering between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. as these are peak evaporation hours. Next. In Port Washington, smart automatic irrigation customers must also adhere to our zone map. For example, Baxter Estates and Plando Manor in yellow are allotted 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. This protects us from pumping too much at any given hour, spreading the load out. Next. The next Do It for Port conservation tool is sustainable gardening. Megan will talk more about this, but I wanted to invite everyone to Port Washington's first ever sustainable garden tour hosted by Rewild Long Island and the Port Washington Water District on Saturday, June 18th. Registration is required, and I will drop the link in the chat when I'm done speaking. Next. Pictured here are the biodiverse and sustainable gardens on tour that feature pollinator-friendly native plants, no-mow lawns, composting, organic fruits and vegetables, smart sprinklers, and more. Next. And our final strategy is empowering our youth to be stewards of our drinking water, like Sam Adler. Port Washington students and their parents are invited to the Port Washington Public Library tomorrow, May 18th at 4 p.m. for a fun and engaging conversation about protecting and preserving the community's water source. For this effort, the Port Washington Water District is collaborating with the Long Island Science Museum and Rewild Long Island. The district will unveil a Do It for Port certificate program for students grades 3 through 12 with actions targeted by grade to accelerate conservation on the peninsula. And as a sidebar, some of these activities involve collaboration with household leaders like parents so that we can get everybody on board. Again, I will put the registration for this student program in the chat, and I thank you all for being here today. And as I said before, if you love your community, water less.
Thank you, Mindy. And now we welcome the town's sustainability specialist, Megan Fastuka, to share concrete steps that we as individuals can take to conserve water and replenish our aquifers.
Thanks so much, Councilwoman Larby. Hi, everyone. Thanks to our speakers so far and for everyone for being with us this evening. So I'm going to expand on what Mindy has spoken about and provide some more ways we can all help to conserve water. First, I'll discuss some simple ways to save water indoors. One really helpful thing you can do is check for leaks. A drip rate of 1 drip per second can waste more than 3,000 gallons per year of water. And you can see from the graphic that across the US, we waste 1 trillion gallons of water annually to leaks. So please check for leaks. You can also turn off the tap. I'm sure everyone's heard this one while shaving or brushing your teeth. This can save 8 gallons of water a day. Taking showers instead of baths is also great, since a full bathtub can require up to 70 gallons of water, while a 5-minute shower only uses 10 to 25 gallons. Using a dishwasher instead of washing dishes by hand, and when you do, make sure it's fully loaded. That saves water. Another tip is to scrape your plate instead of rinsing it before loading it into the dishwasher. Also thawing foods in the refrigerator overnight rather than running tap water to thaw your foods. That'll save water. Using a compost pile for your food wastes instead of using a garbage disposal. And also washing only full loads of laundry, as well as getting a high efficiency Energy Star labeled model, which uses 50% less water and electricity as well. And as Mindy was talking about, the town is a WaterSense partner. So we encourage everyone to consider WaterSense appliances like toilets, faucets, shower heads. These can save you 20 to 30% less water than standard appliances. And these are found in most stores. A lot of, you go to Home Depot. I'm not saying everyone should go to Home Depot, but if you go to these big box stores, they carry these appliances. You just look for the WaterSense seal like it has on the screen right there. So as Dr. Malin and Mindy showed, Long Island's peak water use is in the summer months. And that great increase is mostly due to irrigation. So I'm going to provide some ways we can save water in our outdoor landscapes. This graphic here shows that as much as 50% of the water we use for outdoor irrigation is wasted due to things like evaporation, leaks, sprinklers pointed at the wrong direction, and runoff. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people sprinklers watering their driveway or their sidewalk and not actually watering the plants that they're supposed to be watering. So if you can check that and adjust it, that's definitely helpful. So as much as I do not love lawns, I know a lot of people have them, so it's important that we learn about how to take care of them and water them properly so we can conserve water. So Mindy already discussed how you can save water with a sprinkler system. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what the lawn actually needs in terms of watering, because I don't think most people actually know that. So established turf needs about 1 to 1.5 inches of water per week. You can test how much your sprinkler is putting out by using a rain gauge or just taking like a cat food or tuna fish can, which is around 1 inch thick, putting your sprinkler on and seeing how long it takes to fill up the can. And then this is how much time you should be watering per week, minus the rain. If you're getting a lot of rain, you can decrease that amount. And you should water on a deep and infrequent basis. I'll use my laser pointer. You can see in this picture that the watering this way will allow better root growth. So don't water every other day for 15 to 45 minutes. Mindy spoke about regulations for odd and even watering days. And just because you can water those specific days doesn't mean you have to water those specific days. You don't have to water every other day. In fact, you probably shouldn't. The best time to supply water is first thing in the morning. Again, regulations tell you not to water from 10 to 4 p.m. And this will allow less evaporation and the wind will be lower and you won't have the heat of the afternoon. So often most of the water needed, unless we're in a drought, will be supplied by the rain. And as Mindy discussed, if you have an automatic system, the best thing you can do is use an irrigation controller paired with a rain sensor or soil moisture sensor so that you're watering when it's needed and not just every, when it's set to water. And I know many love their perfect green lawn, but sometimes letting lawns go dormant during hot days in the summer, it's okay. Dormant turf can survive up to 4 weeks and will green back up once the temperatures drop and rain returns. The grasses that we have, most of them are cool season grasses, which means that they grow mostly well when it's cooler, so in the fall and the spring. So that's why in the summer it's okay if they go dormant. So it's also important to mow properly. For healthy low maintenance lawns, set your lawnmower to trim the grass to 3 inches or higher. The shorter you mow, the smaller the root systems, and then this leaves your lawn more vulnerable to drought, to insects, weeds, and requires more fertilization. And longer grass helps cool the soil surface, reducing water loss from the soil and decreasing competition from warm season weeds like crabgrass. Mulch mowing is also great, which is leaving the clippings on the lawn. It provides nutrients as well as reduces water loss. And you should never remove more than 1/3 of an inch of the grass blade at any one time. Short grass will cause short roots, weak grass, hot soil, weeds, and low soil moisture. Also keep your mower's blades sharp. It's essential, as a dull mower will increase your water loss. All right, enough of lawns. Another way that is great that you can conserve water is by harvesting rainwater. So it's basically just collecting rainwater you can collect it just freely from the sky or off of an impermeable structure where you'll get more of it, like a roof, and then using it at a later time. It has many benefits, like reducing the demand on the existing water supply, reducing stormwater pollution, saving money on potable water. And it's also said to be good for plants. So rainwater is said to be better for plants than tap water since it doesn't have chlorine, which can possibly inhibit plants from taking in nutrients and reduce growth. A rain barrel, you could see one in the picture, is a very common system that is used in homes. It is a container that's usually around 50 gallons. The town usually or it does have a program where we sell rain barrels to our residents to encourage these great environmental benefits. However, its popularity has exceeded the supply that we have. So currently all of our rain barrels are reserved. So if you're interested and didn't get one this year, please check back next year. So there's many types of rain barrels, but all have the same basic properties. They'll have a screen to prevent mosquitoes and debris, but allowing the water to flow in. So that would be on top here. They'll have a spigot down here to drain the water out. And then they'll have an overflow spout or hose in the front so that if the rain barrel fills up, the water doesn't come out where the screen is and go into the foundation of your house. To install it, you want to place it underneath a gutter downspout as in the picture, in a location, if you can, close to where you like to use the water, so it's easier to, transport. You most likely may need to cut your gutter downspout. Most of them usually flow, down to the ground to do the proper height. And also you want to put it up on cinder blocks or some kind of stand so that you can increase the water pressure and allow a watering can to fit underneath. You want to make sure the foundation is stable wherever you place it. When it's filled, they can be hundreds of pounds. So you definitely don't want that falling over on top of you and hurting someone. So the water in your rain barrel, you should not drink it. Don't give it to your pets, only use it to water plants. And also use caution if you're using the water from your roof when watering your vegetable garden, because there are many chemicals on the roofs that can leach into the water, as well as bacteria and from things like bird droppings. So you want to make sure that you're not ingesting this. If you do use it on edible crops, make sure you're washing them very well and thoroughly before you eat them. And try not to water the actual edible part. Try to just water the ground where the plants are. So another thing you can use is efficient hoses. So a soaker hose on the left here has small, tiny holes that run throughout the length of the hose. And in drip irrigation here has holes that are spaced evenly and in these tubes. And these hoses help water be directed right to the roots so that it won't evaporate, unlike sprinklers that spray water into the air. So they definitely save a lot of water. Another thing you can do is use mulch in your garden beds. This will limit evaporation and has the added benefit of suppressing weeds. There are many different types, as you can see in the diagram over here. Leaves are a great free mulch. I know everybody is used to always getting rid of their leaves when the fall comes, but they provide such great benefits. They can be composted. They can be used as mulch in your garden beds, and they also really provide habitat for wildlife. They provide a lot of overwintering habitat for different insects like butterflies and bees. So don't get rid of all your leaves, use them. They have great purpose. And just a note for trees, I see this all the time when I'm driving, do not volcano mulch your trees. This is bad. If you have the mulch coming right up to the trunk like this, moisture will get trapped around the roots and it leads to fungus and rot. So you want to mulch like this and give your roots some oxygen. So another way to save water is by using less water intensive or drought tolerant plants, especially when replacing lawn. And native plants are a great option. These have lived and evolved over hundreds or even thousands of years in a particular region and are adapted to the climate of that region. So the ones that are native here are adapted to our dry summers. It can handle some drought. It can handle the rains we get. And they've also evolved with our wildlife, like pollinators. So those plants are really important as well. When talking about natives, it's best to stick with those that are closest to your region. So just because something is native to the United States doesn't mean it's proper to be used on Long Island. You want things that are native to Long Island, native to a close northeast region at least. And as you can see from the graphic, they provide many ecosystem services, like pollinator and wildlife habitat, carbon capture, storm buffers, climate moderation, and stormwater capture. So as I said, native plants are great for the absorption of stormwater runoff, which has increased due to flooding and intense storms from climate change. They have very long root systems that create spaces in the soil, which can then take in the water. So this allows the water to seep into the soil and eventually recharge our aquifers. And they also sequester carbon, which is great for combating climate change as well. So as you can see from the photo, sorry, this is a little off. This is Kentucky bluegrass right here. And you can see how tiny the roots are. They are only a few inches deep, while our native grasses like Indian grass, big blue stem, switchgrass, and little blue stem have roots that are 8 to 10 feet deep. So they can definitely help absorb more water into the ground. Another benefit of native plants is their need for lower inputs from us. So they only need to be watered until they are established or in long droughts, as long as you're choosing the right plant for the right place. So you don't want to choose some wetland or swamp plant for a very dry area in your yard, because then you will be watering it to make it survive. And they also don't need fertilizer since they're adapted to local soils. So another great way to help with resiliency in terms of climate change is to plant trees. So especially, I'm gonna plug native trees, ones that are native to our region. Trees have so many benefits. They absorb air pollutants, provide food and habitat for wildlife, reduce air conditioning and heating costs when next to buildings. They absorb greenhouse gases and store carbon, and they're also beautiful. So in relation to climate change, they absorb stormwater and prevent flooding and runoff while also taking in pollutants from the stormwater. And they not only provide shade for us, but shade for the plants underneath them. So when we have very hot summers, they'll help prevent the water from evaporating, and that'll reduce the need to water these plants. And these are photos of some beautiful native trees that we have. The one on the left is Eastern Redbud. A lot of people love that tree, and I do too. It's very beautiful. And then the one on the right, this is actually at my house. It's called choke cherry. So it's a type of cherry. These both, I know a lot of people are hesitant to plant really large trees. These trees are only 20 to 30 feet, so not too big. So native ground covers are a great way if you have, I understand people have lawns, you know, if they play sports, if they have kids that want to play, that's great. If you have a lot of lawn area that you don't really play on too much, that you can replace with something else, a native ground cover is a great way to put something in to save water and also help recharge our aquifers, and not have that water intensive lawn on your property. So these are some pictures of some native ground covers that you could use. One is Pennsylvania sedge. It's kind of grassy looking if you like that look, and it's good for more shady areas. This is creeping or moss phlox. This is actually in front of my house. And this was happening just a week ago. The flowers unfortunately are starting to wane at this point, but it's very beautiful. It has a great mass flowering effect if you plant it like this. And it spreads out very quickly too. So it's good for ground cover. And then on the right over here, this is wild strawberry. So I also have this in my yard. It spreads pretty quickly too. And it also produces edible strawberries. So if you can get them before the wildlife too, it's another benefit of having that plant. So a few years ago, I was sick of my very dry, sunny front yard, and I decided to replace all my lawn. You can see the before picture with native plants. So besides my desire to attract pollinators, I also wanted to save water and reduce my maintenance, because I didn't have an automatic sprinkler system, and I didn't feel like I want to set up the sprinkler every few days to water it. So with the high summer temperatures and lack of rain, I've yet to water this since I planted it. I'm definitely saving water and maintenance with replacing my lawn in the front there. And I also think it looks very beautiful. And then these are some pictures of some of the town's pollinator gardens that have native plants. At Clark Botanic Garden, we have a pollinator garden and a rain garden which has many plants. There are also native plants throughout the many gardens there as well. Gary Park in Roslyn over here, we have a bunch of pollinator gardens there, including an over 3,000 square foot rock garden. Ritter's over here, we planted 2 pollinator gardens a couple of years ago around the pond. This is at Tully Park, right behind the dog park. So if you ever go visit, take a look and you'll see our pollinator garden back there while you're hanging out with your dog. And then we have a few more at Bunky Reed, Martin Reed Park, at Fushillo Park, and at Yes We Can Center. So if you're ever visiting, please check out our pollinator gardens. And then here are just some up close examples of beautiful native plants. I know people are used to these exotic plants that we have. They think they're so beautiful, but we have so many beautiful native plants as well. So we have purple coneflower with little skipper butterflies hanging out on them, mountain laurel, which I love, their flowers are gorgeous, red chokeberry, garden phlox, goldenrods, anise hyssop, which is a pollinator magnet. So if you want to attract butterflies and bees, that's a great plant to get. And blazing star, which is also a really cool looking plant. So another way to help recharge our aquifers as well as use native plants is in rain gardens. These gardens are shallow depressions in the landscape that are used to capture stormwater. And you can see in this side view how it has kind of a bowl shape. So it's capturing that water and helping it to recharge. They have many benefits, such as pollution reduction, aquifer replenishment, wildlife habitat. And this is a picture right after we planted the one at Clark. It doesn't look like this anymore. The plants are much bigger, but I just wanted to show you what it looked like right after planting. And how these rocks, it helps it take the water from the pavement. And there's also an underground pipe, which takes the water from the roof as well. I'm going to quickly run through these because I know it's already 8 o'clock. Last year, the town received funding from the Soil and Water Conservation District to offer residents rebates for creating native plant gardens in their yard. We created 13. These are a few examples. They came out really great. These were one in Roslyn Heights, one in Mineola, and one in Port Washington. So they were spread throughout the town. And then we are very happy to be offering this program again this year. Residents can apply for up to $350 for purchase of native plants to create a native plant garden or rain garden in their home. Please visit northhempsteadny.gov/sustainability for more details and to apply, and please spread the word to anyone that you may think will be interested as well. All right, last thing I will say is another great way to help water infiltrate underground and reduce stormwater runoff is using pervious and permeable pavers and asphalt and concrete. This is pervious concrete. It looks just like traditional concrete, except it has the fine particles removed so the water can flow right through it. And then this is interlocking pavers, where they have spaces in between the pavers that are filled with grass or stones that allow water to pass through. And for more information, you can visit our website that I just said before. Our sustainability page has more information on everything. And now I will pass it back to Councilwoman Lurvy for questions.
Thank you so much, Megan. So impressive, and love the lawn. I'm doing something similar on the side of my driveway, and I really hope it looks as nice as yours does. I might have to invite you over to make sure.
Sure.
A little consulting perhaps on the side. This is amazing. The town has come such a long way, on a very important journey here, with trees, with sustainability, with water, with all of this. And the beauty of these educational programs, I think, is that, they're recorded, they create a community. Somebody mentioned, what about the villages? And I think the really beauty of these programs is that they create a community that's now knowledgeable, knows what the town is doing, and can approach the villages and say, hey, this is what the town is doing. How about you do this also? Or how about you reach out to them and find out how to do this, right? Villages don't really like being told what to do by the town. Sometimes when there's legislation, it really should come from Nassau County. But when the residents themselves bring a good idea, and it's working somewhere else, it's the way the town leads by example. So I really hope that those people who are here who do live in villages and see a good idea, reach out to their elected officials there to try to spread this kind of behavior throughout the entire town. So that was one question that was answered, was the question about villages. There were so many good questions. I don't even know where to begin, but some of them were already answered. You know, people were talking about natives. People were talking about moving from lawns to natives. There was one question at the beginning that I think is a question for Mindy. And it reminded me of when I traveled to California. I have family in Los Angeles. There's always signs saying there's reclaimed water being used, right? And don't drink it. This is reclaimed water. This is for watering, right? This is not for drinking. So the question was, is there a way to separate the lines of fresh water for drinking from the lines that carry water that is used for lawns or other non-drinking water?
So it sounds like what you're talking about would require a separate line for each household for both for irrigation and from the water that's used in the household. That's not the way the system is set up right now. That would be a big infrastructure change. I'm not saying that it's something that shouldn't be considered in the future. It's definitely a way to turn off somebody's irrigation if they're not complying with the rules, and not turn off their entire house system. Today, if somebody's not complying, we have to turn off their whole house system, which, you know, nobody really wants to do. So we have a system of warnings, which happen to work very well. Our operators that are in the field, if they see somebody not complying to the rules, they will drop off a warning, and there is a fine, and we tend to find that that works really well. But the investment that you're talking about is another way to do it, and something that could be considered in the future, but it is a financial investment.
Right. So some of the people who are listening have pointed out that golf courses, large industrial users, right? They are obviously the quantity that they use is much greater than you or I would use. So do you think there should be a discussion about maybe regulating them differently or requiring them to change their behavior, or, you know, anything along those lines?
Well, we have something called a conservation rate structure that I think most districts have. And what that does is it charges a lot more per gallon for like a big, you know, commercial site that's using a lot of water. So that is one way of dealing with that. I have to say that I am working with Dr. Mayland and members of the Town of North Hempstead through the Western Nassau County Aquifer Committee on a really innovative Nassau County conservation plan. And one of the elements of that plan would be to do these innovation clusters where we would put together hospitals, and there would be grants for them to inspire them to come up with projects that actually meet certain water reductions. So those are the kinds of things that are happening in New York City that we're looking closely at. And I don't know if you wanted to comment any further on that, Sarah, but there's a lot going on in New York City. They have a different problem than us because they don't have the lawns, but they have been really effective at having tremendous population growth, and at the very same time, reducing water through through these innovative practices. And one of them are these like cluster innovation grant programs. That's something that Sarah and I have been studying. The biggest issues on Long Island is the golf courses and you know, the lawns, as we talked about before. But golf courses, and I saw people in the chat, and I know the Town of North Hempstead actually is working on some innovative water conservation strategies for their golf courses. But, then there's the private courses. And so it's about getting everybody on board beyond the town.
Right, right. That, usually involves a combination of a cultural shift and legislation and enforcement, right? It's a concerted effort of the water district as well as the town, maybe even state, right? There's a lot that goes into that.
Yes. And someone just put in the chat about how do we publicize these issues to the entire population? That is such a good question that we have been all really wrestling with. And I think these forums are so important. And I know that we're also trying to get to the contractors themselves, and they're not easy to get to, especially once irrigation season starts, because you can't get to them. We did an educational forum with the Roslyn Water District for all the contractors that work in Port Washington and Roslyn. We had them on a Zoom and we educated them about all of our regulations so that when they're setting the sprinkle systems, they're following the rules. But we couldn't require them to attend. So, we got a very large attendance. I think this season it's going to make an impact, but we just hope that everyone on this Zoom becomes part of the mission of changing the water culture in North Hempstead and the county and Long Island.
So when you talk about landscaping companies, there are requirements that they need to be permitted. They need to be permitted to operate in the town, different permits for the villages and different permits for disposing of their landscaping waste at the Solid Waste Management Authority. So, education could be, reaching out to the Town of North Hempstead clerk's office, perhaps, and when they come in to get their permit, being told, what the proper behaviors are, being incentivized even in some way. I mean, maybe we can start the conversation about that.
That's
A lot of this is starting a conversation. There's a lot of ideas in the chats about legislation, and we might not get through all of them today, but I do want everybody to know that, your ideas are very much taken seriously. Just like when we were redoing the town's tree policy, it was only through the input of people from throughout the town that we were able to put together a policy that worked and that advanced a certain, went to a certain way, right? So the same thing is with water conservation. A conversation like this and all the ideas that you're giving us, I think any questions that are not answered, especially if they have to do with legislation, we will make sure to get you the answers after the fact. Okay, what else do we have here? There was, who might be the right person to discuss all the toxic contaminants in the drinking water, please? So, today's conversation was a little bit more on the quantity of water than the quality, but if somebody has a question about toxic contaminants, where can they turn to?
From the individual water supplier's perspective, each water district is required to release a water quality report annually. And we have what's called MCLs, maximum contaminant levels, that we have to stay within range for contaminants. And as Sarah noted earlier, there is so much more treatment now than 20 years ago because of all the damage that industry has put on our aquifer system. So that is why water is becoming more expensive. But in terms of, I could speak for my district, all of the water that goes in the distribution system. And if you remember, there's a really big distinction between raw water, which is the water that's pumped out from the aquifer, and then treated water, which goes into the distribution system. So I caution people when they're looking at reports to make the distinction between the two. And I could say that in Port Washington, we meet all of the health and safety departments. We're regulated by the Department of Health in the county and in the state. And we sample monthly, quarterly, annually, depending on what you're talking about. And we also get random checks where we don't know when they're coming, and they come and they check our water. So it's very, very heavily regulated. So you should feel comfortable about the water that is treated. And as Sarah said before, the raw water that comes is a different story. And that's what Sarah's point was. And that's why we have so much more elaborate treatment than we've had in the past. But the good news, if I could share one piece of good news, is that we can detect things at we used to test at like parts per million. Now we test at parts per billion. So, that's the good news.
I'm just reading a post about a transition town, Port Washington, the Science Museum of Long Island, protecting the health of our surface water bodies and our aquatic ecosystems through citizen science and informed action. Planning to measure nitrate, ammonia, dissolved oxygen, and salinity and macroinvertebrate assemblages for years to come. Do you have any recommendations for guidance? Is that a water supplier's question or not? No? Okay. But it's wonderful that they're doing these things. It's really wonderful.
Sarah
that
might
they do.
have a comment, I'm not sure.
Right. There have been some questions about Manhasset Bay. So there is a Manhasset Bay Protection Commission that is monitoring and working on issues that unite the different municipalities around Manhasset Bay, including water quality. So those people who are asking about Manhasset Bay, I would encourage you to go online and take a look at what they're doing and maybe join one of their meetings or read their meeting notes to find out what's happening there. There was also a question about using a landmark status to prevent overdevelopment. The town does have a historical landmark preservation commission. Landmarking status starts from a resident application. If you want more information, I'm going to start to wrap this up, I think, because it is 8:15 already, and there are so many good questions. We will respond to them, but I will say I will put my email in the chat so that if you have a question, the gentleman who asked about the Historical Landmark Preservation Commission, if you want to follow up with me, or anybody else wants to follow up with me, you're welcome to do so. And I think, unless one of the panelists has anything more to say, I'm just writing my email right there. Unless the panelists have anything more to say, I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you so much to all of you for speaking and for sharing, and our audience for attending. We hope you've learned a lot and will help us spread a culture of water conservation and protection throughout the town. Please visit, I think Megan mentioned it before, but I'll mention it again, northhempsteadny.gov/climate action for more information on the town's climate initiatives. The link will be put in the chat box. So I am going to go ahead and do that unless Megan is doing that already.
It's on the screen, so.
Oh, it's already there. Yeah. So
It's not that difficult to remember, right?
So on that note, thank you again, and everybody have a good night.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.